Good afternoon. It is the 22nd of November 2023. Welcome to yet another edition of the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV. I am Phillip Muliisa. Today, we are discussing an issue that is so pertinent to the young people of this country, of this region, but also the continent, and by extension to the world: employment. The topic is employment challenges in Uganda. And we are looking at the Court of Appeal ruling to fire employees without notice. Is it a good move for the country, or is it a sad one? I have a very, very elegant, benevolent, noble panel to help us understand that and give us the details of what it looks like to have such a ruling in a country. I'll give a minute to each of them to introduce themselves before we delve into the deeper conversation, and I will start from my extreme left. Gentlemen, you're most welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Help the viewer understand who you are.
Good afternoon. My name is Isaac Kwagala. I am a civil rights lawyer, and it's a pleasure to be a part of this show. And good afternoon to my fellow panelists. I'm looking forward to very good deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You're most welcome, civil rights lawyer. In between, we have a lady.
Like they say, the future is female. A good afternoon to us all. Mirembe Angela is my name. A student from Kyambogo University, pursuing a bachelor's degree in science technology in biology. But I am a lover of the youth, so be sure when we talk about employment and the youth in the same statement and injustices, I will be one of the voices to say, please, be nice to us.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome, and thank you. We can't wait to hear what you have to tell us about that particular subject. And on my immediate left, you're most welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here on the Youth Roundtable. My name is Wilson Nuwandinda. I'm a researcher in international relations, and I'm an unemployed youth. So talking about unemployment is very vital to us who are hitting that field. I'm looking forward to an interesting conversation with my panelists.
Thank you so much. There you have it from my panel. And I want to start with you, Mr. Isaac Kwagala, who is a lawyer. We have a ruling. Court of Appeal says an employer has a right to fire you or myself. My bosses have a right to fire me without notice. How did we come to such a ruling, and what does it even mean for the jurisprudence of this country?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As far as the decision of the Court of Appeal is concerned, may I say that I find it deeply agonizing for a whole section of employees with respect to the labor market relations as between the employers and the employees. Why do I say so? I say so for the reason that I think once again, the courts have reaffirmed the primacy of the employer when it comes to, the relationship between the employer and the employee. But for me, I think also the major takeaway for me from the decision is that it is not entirely unexpected, or at least the decision as a legal observer and practitioner, I anticipated it. I think if you are to make a trail of the most recent decisions with respect to labor matters, you realize that the courts of law have emphasized strongly the strong leverage and prerogative that the employer has to terminate the contract of an employee, provided that they satisfy certain requirements of the law. And that's the law, because the law says all the employer has to do is to demonstrate that they have issued notice to the employee, or in the absence of notice, in lieu of the notice, then they make a compensation to them for a period of 3 months. So what is also of, I think, special and practical significance for me is the attitude that the courts of law have demonstrated. It appears to me that the courts of law are very stiff and rigid. They have taken a conservative approach and view of the issue, and they are simply saying that we are very protectionist of the prevailing and dominant economic order of the day, which is capitalism. So you realize that the courts of law are taking a very cautious and some sort of self-censorship approach with respect to adjudicating such matters. And it is also of significance that we do not lose, I think, track of the role of the lawmaker, parliament, because the court's duty is simply to interpret and apply the law to the facts as they are. But the person that is responsible for making the law, for designing the law, is the parliament. And perhaps we should ask, what is the motivation? What was the motivation of the parliament at the time of making this law? Again, it takes us back to the attitude that the court is demonstrating. I think parliament recognized the fact that we are now under a strong and dominant economic system, which is capitalism, and it did not want to append that system by giving primacy and leverage to the rights of the employee as opposed to the employer. So in other words, it's now more convenient for the employer to terminate contractual relations with the employee out of the need to perhaps protect their business, because it's quite difficult for you to build again from the ground as opposed to, let's say, just laying off a person and maybe in limited terms you compensate them for that loss. But lastly, on the subject of what it means, the significance, it is also, I think, crucial that we draw the distinction between termination and dismissal. For some people, they use the two terms interchangeably, which is not the case. With termination, the court is saying the employer has the right to end that relationship, the contractual relationship as between the employer and the employee. However, as standard practice, you have to satisfy the two requirements. Either you issue notice or you issue compensation in lieu of the notice. That is when you've not served the notice. Now, with dismissal, it means that on account of an employee's misconduct, you institute an investigation into the issue or the matter, whatever it is. Then the findings of that investigation will determine the next course of action that you take with respect to their matter. Now, if the finding is adverse and it is to the effect that maybe the employee has flouted certain regulations or certain laws governing the relationship, the provisions of the contract, then you can dismiss them. But you see, that is as a result of a comprehensive investigative process into the matter. Now, with termination, you could say, I think bluntly, it is arbitrary, provided the employer can satisfy the other requirements. So now that's what brings in the debate when it is reported, especially in the media, that it is now okay for the employer to terminate without notice or without reason in layman's language. So I think it's clear that we make that clarification.
Thank you so much, Counsel. And I want to engage you, Madam Biologist, who is so passionate about young people and employment. How did you receive news that actually your boss can terminate your contract, can send you off without notice and without reason, actually?
It is so demeaning, sorry to say, that I can work in a place for a time and be told off without reason. How you wake up each morning to try to be the best at your work. Wake up in the morning as early as 6 a.m., be at work by 8 or 7:50, making sure your boss is not there. Like you reach before your boss. And then your boss one morning wakes up and says, Mirembe, your services are no longer needed here. Please try your talents elsewhere without a reason. It's like your parent chasing you from home without a reason. I mean, put yourself in those shoes. So my perception about that is it is in one way or another not kind, because time is money. There is a bit which says that if an employee has worked for about 6 months or less, they don't even need notice to be terminated. Like, it makes the person have spent their time for nothing, because they have literally shown you that your presence before and your presence after are negligible. And yet, when we are in spaces of work, what we are trying to be is people whose presence is relevant. Like you've had that phrase, your absence is how do they say it? Unfelt absence is irrelevant presence. And yet in all your time, you worked so hard to be relevant. It is really demeaning. And for the boss who has done that, and different persons who are stakeholders, or the judges who are in favor of this motion that we are speaking about, are they not employees? I want them to take a minute and sit down and think, if they were in the shoes of the employee who were told off after working themselves off for more than 10 years, and they've been told, please, your judgeship is no longer needed here. Like, let them take a minute and think, put themselves in the shoes of that person. And a country like Uganda, whose population has, I think, 70% youth, of which a greater population is unemployed. Now, we are trying to reduce the unemployment among the youth, and they are trying to increase the unemployment among the youth, moreover, with no reason. I would love to ask my nation, what pioneers, the people who think for the nation, like, if they passed a ruling that you can easily send someone off their work without reason, how much more shall it affect the generations to come? Because if the employers are in the ages of 40 and above, and they keep on unemploying us, it's going to leave a backlog of very useless people. Because if we are not having something to do with our time, it's going to make us the unemployed youth. There is something they call the youth who don't have things to do. That's what we shall be. And if we have something to do, we start being a building block to the nation. So I think they should rethink that policy.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Mirembe. Mr. Nuwandinda, what do you make of the ruling?
As my fellow panelists, especially the council, has broken down that the law, but when I read through the act, I think we don't have to blame court in this case. Court ruled according to the laws that Parliament passed. If they say you have to inform the employee 3 months prior and compensate them for 3 months, which Stanbic Bank in this case did as the employer of Miss, is it Miss who? The employees specifically who took the Stanbic Bank to court. So what we are saying, now Parliament has to go back to the drawing board and polish these laws. Because if the law says if you have worked for 6 months, then your employer does not need even to inform you about the termination of the contract or dismissal. Which part I agree with, because 6 months in most cases it's a probational term. We all lie on our CVs.
Mr. Nuwandinda, 6 months.
As an employee.
No, 6 months you are being paid. You're not working for free, but it's a probational term. That's what they term, it's a probational term, 6 months. So if the employer sees that you are not up to the standard of the company, you're not adding anything, then they can terminate your contract. But then, if you have worked for 5, 2, 10 years, like in this case, the person had worked for 10 years and above. I think she was employed in 2001 and the contract was terminated in 2020. So what the employer did, compensated her for 3 months salary, 17 million specifically, like they say. That was 3 months prior. So the employer obeyed and respected all the laws, like they say in the Employment Act, they tagged. So may I put the blame to the makers of the law? In this case, it is not right. You can imagine, like she was saying, waking up, working, and then out of the blue, your employer says, no, you see what? You no longer need your services. You don't have what to add on, you have bills to pay, you have children to pay fees for. So it is not right. But then that's what the law says. It's what the law says. The employer did not violate any law. Did they? They did not. So we have to put the blame. And then ironically, I saw the workers' MPs also now blaming the court of the laws they made. So I really don't understand. But so you might put the blame to the makers of the law, the parliament. They have to polish these laws to favor the employees. However, though we are blaming the employers, but employees, we are also not perfect. You can do so if the, I mean, now if you are not delivering up to the standards of your employer employed you for, what do you want them to do? This is what the whole law should be brought back to parliament and polished. That's what I can say, because the employer passed through the rightful procedures to terminate the contract with it. This is why if she chooses to go to the Supreme Court, we shall see. But as the judgment of the court, I don't blame the court. I see it is what it was and what it was supposed to be. But then I put the blame on the makers of the laws, the parliament. The workers' MPs in this case should take this initiative to go back to court and table these laws and polish them to favor both the employee and the employer. Because if they favor also the employee so much that the employer, you can end up not delivering when you are rest assured that your employer cannot terminate your contract at their convenience. So it should be taken back and polished to favor the two parties.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nuwandinda. I want to come back to you, Counsel. They mentioned a couple of things. The employer followed the law. He has a right, 6 months his probation. But I want to understand, in the laws of Uganda, how we operate. What protection does the employee have from the employer? How are we protected as employees?
I think it's important that we first acknowledge the hierarchy of the laws in our country, because economic rights are guaranteed and protected under the Constitution. I think specifically it's going to be Article 42. Therefore, the practical implication of that is to ensure that there is no exploitation on the part of the employer with respect to their relationship with the employee. But of course, in fair terms, it cannot be a one-way street. That also means there has got to be reciprocity. For example, the law should also ensure that the rights of the employer are also protected and upheld by the law. Now, I think for me, of practical significance in relation to the ruling is that Parliament has failed fundamentally in its duty to address this challenge. If you examine our employment regime, which is of course governed largely by the Employment Act, because it is now that statute that, in practical terms gives meaning to the article in the Constitution, because it expounds how that relationship is supposed to be first and foremost entered into, how it's supposed to be negotiated, how it's supposed to be sustained, how it's supposed to be ended. In that instance, you're looking at two strands, either termination or dismissal. But I think that law is riddled with a number of loopholes. There have been attempts to amend it previously, but I do not think it has been amended in a manner that satisfies the realistic needs and demands of Uganda's employment and labor sector. Why do I say so? You look at this ruling, for example, strictly legally speaking, I think it's apt. I would agree with the interpretation and the approach the court has taken to apply the law, because the court has taken a strict and adherent approach with respect to the application of the law. That's what the law says. But practically, it's an absurd decision. Why is it absurd? A person cannot work for in excess of 10 years and without any reason whatsoever, arbitrarily, you terminate their contract, claiming that that's what the law provides for. That means there is something that is fundamentally erroneous with the law. So if that's being the case, why don't we go back and, interfere with that law, open it up for scrutiny, and then have it amended
You see,
to
in other words,
reflect.
what you're saying, Council, is the Employment Act does not provide any protection for the employees in Uganda.
I am saying there could be instances where it offers limited protection. But what I'm taking strong exception to is that that protection is not sufficient. That's my point. It is not sufficient to meet the realistic expectations of the employees in the labor market. It is designed in a manner that I think offers primacy and wider leverage and discretion to the employer to arbitrarily apply themselves in any manner with respect to the relations between them and the employee, to the detriment of the employee. So in that respect, I think it is unfair, and it is something that the parliamentarians need to check. However, we need to also understand the reality in which we live in. You realize that institutions of the state, from the executive, be it the legislative arm, our parliament, or even the judiciary, are not really independent, as you know, they pretend to be.
Council, that's a serious allegation.
It's not an allegation, it is something that I can substantiate. Why do I say so? For example, you've seen the sticky issue of the question around a minimum wage. This has been a long-standing perennial issue. Whenever we have celebrations to commemorate the Labor Day, you see the workers' groups, different workers' groups, lobby groups for the workers MPs keep on fronting it, appealing to the president to do something about it, to address, that issue, that concern, which is legitimate for the workers. What does the president say? The president says, no, this is not an issue for consideration. And why does he say so? He says so because he's also beholden to certain other, shadow higher powers. These are powers, they are shadow powers that you do not see, with your eyes. But these are powers, higher interest, like, for example, the global financial and economic order. He's always, I think, acting on the advice of certain higher powers. So they dissuade him. They tell him that by you implementing that decision to effect a minimum wage bill for the workers, you're going to hurt our interest. So slam your brakes on that. Do not go that way. And he's always compliant. Now, it takes you back to the attitude and motivation of Parliament with respect to the law, the Employment Act. It is for the reason as to why they make it very expedient and convenient for an employer to terminate the contractual relations with the employee with a lot of ease and without actually, because when you said that the only requirement you've got to satisfy is a notice or 3 months compensation in lieu of the notice, it's very easy. I mean, in that instance, who has a lot to lose. It is the employee, because for sure, the employee is not going to have a source of livelihood. They are not going to have something to sustain themselves and maybe by extension their family, other people that are dependent on them, and so on and so forth. So this is a person who at a moment's notice you have effectively, could say, collapsed their life and their livelihood. So it is very serious. So I think for me,
and you see, Council, if I can engage you on that, when you say in a moment you've collapsed these people's lives, isn't the law supposed to, as they are passing these judgments and interpreting what the two sides are putting on the table, make a consideration of what effect it has to the general public, because you are affecting an entire generation?
Yes, absolutely true. Because, you know, when the courts are considering a judgment, if they are deliberating on a decision, then they have got to make a consideration with respect to what we call public policy. In practical terms, what can be the foreseeable ramifications or implications of this decision on the broader and wider public. So, to me, you could perhaps give that argument, but in the instant case, I think the courts were constrained because the law is clear, and the foremost duty of the courts of law.
But you see, you keep saying the court was constrained.
Yes.
But this is their interpretation. The High Court had said, actually, the bank was wrong. And this court says, no, I think you didn't have to explain anything to this person. You have a right to say, please leave. Why do we blame Parliament, yet it is the interpretation of Justice Barishake and the Deputy Chief Justice and a few other justices?
You see, the question of interpretation can also be subjective. Why do I say it is subjective? It is subjective if it applies to individuals like me or you. But in this case, it is objective because it's a court of record, the Constitutional Court, that has applied its thought process to the facts and the law, and as such, it has rendered a decision. So we are bound by the decision. So in this instance, it is an objective decision. That's why I say, and I hold that the court, in a subjective sense, it wasn't perhaps justified to reach the decision, in that it injures a certain party to the case. But objectively, that's the decision. We are bound by it. We've got to respect it. Therefore, that being the decision of the court and the decision being holding, practically, what can we do to now redress, the plight of the injured party, who is the employee? That's what takes us to Parliament. For Parliament to go and re-examine that law, scrutinize it afresh, and then it can inform itself of what should be done to amend, and also be able to take into account the practical realities and needs of the employees in the country, so that justice can be served fairly as between the employers and the employees.
Thank you so much, Council. Mrs. Angela Mirembe, very passionate about young people. You know, we have a recent report by Bank of Uganda that says the average salary of Ugandans is 200,000 shillings. And it says only 1% of Ugandans are able to earn above 1 million shillings, only 1%. Specific to young people, we know the biggest percentage of young people that are coming out of universities, taking constitutions, and so on, are unemployed. How are these young people surviving even?
As a youth, I tend to look at memes which are posted by people. And our generation has reached using this phrase. We have to excel by hook or by crook. And the meme which I saw said, hook has refused. Now we are going to use crook.
Okay.
Okay, I'm really worried for the generation. But it is so absurd that a person who is 20 plus years is living under their parents' roof. surviving off of their parents' kindness. And when they work, they get 200,000 at most for starters, because it leaves their bare minimum of existence lower than $1 for a whole month. Because let me see first, 200,000. Sorry, as people would have these things. Let me see. There's no money there. 200 shillings. It is really bad. It's really bad, because if you're having 200,000 Ugandan shillings, and now you want, most of us, when we are in our 20s, we start feeling like we need to be independent, try to survive or hustle out life, and you're thinking of your 200,000 supposed to parent, provide food, provide. So how the youths are surviving, we are either trying to be innovative or we are crooking. And when the unemployment comes in and then firing for no reason, it becomes heartbreaking. And if you are left in between a rock and a hard place and you have to make a decision to survive, honestly, the youth may not particularly choose the easiest way out, because life has already given them lemons and they may not even be sure how to make the lemonade. So what most of them are opting to do, I was talking to some people and they said, I think we are in the business of begging. It has become a business, by the way. Then also there is a business of, how do they call it? Try and error. You do something and you're not sure. You go, like I'm doing biotechnology. Life is so hard. I'm going to go and apply to be like a receptionist or something. So if I get that job, well and good. If I don't, also well and good. So our means of survival or modes of survival have become very painful. We have to outdo ourselves, like too much, to survive. So that's generally it. We are now in tight places as youths, and we are still being in tight places as our populations increase. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Nuwandinda, you see, she mentions that now we're on crook. I think Hook has refused.
Yeah.
I want you to give us your view of how young people are surviving in this country, but also as a researcher in international relations. We have a couple of nations around us. We have the East African community. We have we're members of IGAD, then COMESA. Do we have such scenarios in these countries where employees are not respected to this extent?
As she has said, I think we have also passed the crook side, because if there was any relevant word, we should add it there. See, as a youth are suffering because you can calculate the number of students that graduate per year in this country, and the available jobs. So I think this goes back to the employers, why they are paying low wages, because there are very many people willing to work, even at a lower pay than you, because it is all just survival as long as I can get what to eat. Because we have very many graduates. This is why we see people going to the Arab countries to work, trying to create solutions to the problem. Because I always tell people that now let's assume the people that are in Arab countries, the youth in Uganda, now come back in the country. Let's say the Saudi Arabias, the Bahrain, say now we no longer need your services. Go back to your countries. You can imagine what can happen in the country. But there are very many people that they are working abroad, suffering like you see on social media, being mistreated, what. And then, to my surprise, the government is not putting there any subsidies to create employment opportunities for the youth. Even the few that they generate, these myoga, what, every day we see a cow being arrested for embezzling the funds. So we really have a scarcity. I don't know whether of administration or what in the country, but then something has to be done for the youth. People are graduating per year. There are no jobs. They are not creating any jobs. So we have that scarcity. So, like I've said, in the neighboring countries, I think Uganda is worse because we've not seen, as he has said, the minimum wage totally failed. I don't know why. There is a lot of politics. It has totally failed. It has totally failed. It has become a song every year. And the workers' MPs, I don't know whether they.
You know, council here says there's some invisible forces out there that, you know, influence the president not to, you know.
Yeah, I agree with him because we have seen that in Uganda, everywhere there are invisible forces that make things fail. But then, if there is no minimum wage, then we should keep discussing these issues every now and then. There are even people earning 80,000 a month. 80, 10, 20, 80. Because there are no minimum wage. As long as I have a business, I would say I need an employee who can work for 100,000. And trust me, I will get many of them. Because there are no jobs, they will come applying apprentice. This is why you see people suffering. We shall even have a lot of cases in the country, theft, what. These are people that just try to to forge around and navigate through this suffering in the country. You were talking about these regional economic cooperations. For me, I think they are also ceremonial because we're also advocating for this East African integration. And then one of the things we front is that if we get this the 7 countries now integrated, then maybe jobs can be open to many youth and they can acquire jobs. But then before we discuss the issue and expand it to the region, we have to first make things right here, the country. If we still have these things coming up, then even if we are integrated, I don't think there will be anything added. To me, yes.
Thank you. I want to engage council on that one. He mentions a couple of things, including minimum wage and how people are not. But the biggest percentage of Ugandans, and especially youth, are employed in the informal sector. And as far as I understand, this law applies mostly to people in the formal sector, because you must understand most of the people in the informal sector are working without contract. It is a gentleman's understanding, come do this, I'll pay you this, and you come. How do we protect the young people in the informal sector? Does this ruling even have effect on them?
I could say to a limited extent, the application of this ruling is largely directed to the formal sector. And I think it should be the foremost obligation of the government to regulate both the informal and the formal sectors of the economy. Now, like you correctly point out, a critical majority of the employed section of the population, especially the young people, are employed in the informal sector. So it exposes them to a lot of exploitation, a lot of injustice, and also a lot of oppression in that sector. I think, to me, what is evident is that our government does not seem to have the attitude to address and meet the emerging challenges of the labor market and the employment sector as a whole, be it for the formal or the informal sectors. Why do I say so? I say so for the reason that, largely citing my previous example of the failure of the government to, up until this point, institute a minimum wage bill. That's number one. You realize that the minimum wage pay affects significantly members of the informal sector, which is dominated by the youth. So if there is no responsibility to be able to meet those challenges with respect to the most basic issues like a minimum wage bill, then how do you begin to demand for, let's say, more serious issues? By more serious issues, I mean like enacting the relevant laws to govern those relations, the labor relations as between the employer and the employee, even those that affect the informal sector. For example, today, if you randomly walked on the streets of Kampala, you realize that most of the youth, they are doing either, odd jobs, they are doing menial jobs, and they can hardly derive a livelihood, a sustenance, not only for themselves, but also their families or other people that depend on them. Now, the government is also largely absent in that whole grand scheme of things. It is absent for the reason that authorities, local authorities, up to now, they demand, for example, trade licenses from those people that sell grocery on the street, people that do maybe simple businesses like mobile money and kiosks and whatnot. It is another thing to have those businesses regulated, and I support that measure entirely. However, it's another thing if the regulation, first and foremost, is not effective, but secondly, if it is exploitative in a sense that the license fees are already very high. So for most of the youth, they do not have the financial capacity to meet, the payment demands and requirements. Then secondly, there is also open and naked interference by the authorities. For example, it is very common for people disguising as either, even sometimes truly so, as KCCA or even the revenue, stumbling into these businesses and then impounding some of the commodities these people sell to their detriment. So I think the government has got to do pretty much more, especially in areas of regulation, but also with respect to the tax regime, because the tax regime of Uganda is also becoming impossible. Why is it becoming impossible? Is for the fact that the government seems to have, I think, a stronger focus on deepening the tax base instead of widening it. So when you deepen the tax base, you are looking at primarily a narrow sample space of people. But when you make the taxation regimen wide, then comparatively, you can relax some of the strict requirements, especially with regards to fees, whatnot, so that you bring in as many people as possible into that pool, and then you can collect from all those people, and before you know it, you're expanding the tax base for the country. So for me, I believe that primarily it should be the responsibility of the government as the foremost stakeholder in ensuring that there is a turnaround in the labor relations, both in the formal but also in the informal sector. Then secondly, there should be, I think, the deliberate measures to build and boost and expand the capacity of the young people. My brother here correctly points out that today we have so many young people educated with bachelor's degree and a host of other qualifications, but who can hardly find jobs. You see, the issue is not about qualifications. I think that's a wrong approach. I think the approach should be, at an early stage, we should have a deliberate mechanism of identifying the unique talents and competencies and capabilities of people so that we support them in entrenching and further building their capacity along the lines of something that they are talented in, so that right away from a young age, they are able to, amplify that one thing, and then, if possible, be able to make a living, derive a livelihood and a living out of it.
But you see, Council, in that aspect, earlier you did mention about the global, employment and economic systems. And one of the things they call out for is qualification, experience. In fact, a gentleman like him leaves university, who wants to get into employment, they'll ask him for experience of 10 years. That's the standard.
You see, my argument does not dispense with the need to have qualifications. I'm simply saying, besides the qualifications, there is a whole range of so many other things, other fields that we can apply the talents of these youths to make a livelihood out of them. For example, sports. And for those developed countries, it has proved to be one, I think, of the largest, sectors of the economy.
That's true.
Why is that the case? It's because they invest heavily in the talent development of the youths, right from their formative ages.
Is that the case
And
for Uganda?
they give them exposure. Apart from the exposure, the government has a deliberate mechanism of funding the development of those talents. So it's easier if I think a person to really demonstrate their talent at a very high level and platform, and in the process derive sustenance and livelihood out of it. So I'm simply saying that is the thing we should also be able to replicate as Ugandans, especially for the government.
Thank you so much, Council. I want to engage, before I come to you, I want to engage Mr. Nuwandinda here. Recently, the Minister of Microfinance, the Honorable Kasoro, is quoted to have said that poor Ugandans should actually be caned. That how can you be poor in Uganda? Government has put up initiatives like Emyoga, the Parish Development Model, Entandikwa, Wanabagaggawale, Youth Livelihood Fund, Women, so many of them. I don't know. Are youth catered for in these programs, or is it that youth just do not want to get rich, like the minister said?
I think now, Honorable Kasoro, I don't know what he bases on to say a statement like that, but then
He says government is giving you money.
which money?
PDM,
Where has it gone?
Youth
Cows are
Livelihood
stealing.
Fund.
He's in the driving seat of Emyoga. How many people have benefited from Emyoga? How many cows have been imprisoned every now and then? To the ground, they put 100 million at the sub-county. To get there, 20 million now that is in saturation. It takes me back to the problem of administration and enforcement of these things. So now, the problem with these leaders, they don't know actually what is happening on the ground. They are just driven in SUVs, going to the functions, and they just don't know what the local man like me is facing in the harsh streets of Kampala. Because that was those are great initiatives, the PDMs, the Myoga, like you were saying, because we have seen that now qualifications, your degree doesn't matter. These things, you're going to the university and you think you will go and get a white-collar job, we should literally forget about that and look for other, if we have any skill, then what will happen to some, now the skills, of course, to get a skill at this age, now which skill can you start at 25, 30? Like you were saying, it needs to go back to maybe primary schools, secondary schools, and instill skills in these people, so that when they are growing up and they find they are surfacing this unemployment in the country, they at least have some extra skill. Now, the problem goes back to the leader. If I would zero down on what Kasura is saying, is it really ethical to say that poor people should be? I think poverty is not a choice. Is it really a choice? Do you choose to be poor? If they have given you something to do, why do not go? Why don't you make something out of it? The Myoga funds is being eaten by these people. First of all, like we have seen, this is not an accusation or what allegation. We have seen these people. The minister himself has been pinned on several occasions about the same.
Yes, and I think recently there is an allegation. I think he appeared before Kosase, and they
Yes.
say allegedly the minister paid himself 2 billion shillings of the Myoga money.
Exactly, that's what I'm talking about. He himself is being pinned on the same. When money goes zeroing down to reach the ground, it is actually 20% of the money that was allocated to get there. And then the same person is saying youth should be kind for being poor. So we have now a scarcity of leaders and implementation in the country. This is what we are really suffering from. Implementing the few government programs that it brings up so that it benefits the local person. Still, the little money that is allocated does not reach to the ground. That is the problem. So, to answer the question directly, the youth have totally not been empowered at all in the country. That's what I can say.
Thank you so much. Miss Angela, apart from what he talks about, the corruption, money not being able to reach the ground and so on, the failure of leadership, you young people are not taking part in government programs. You are not involved in Emyoga, you are not involved in PDM, you are not in Tandikwa, women affairs and so on. Why? You people want to be poor?
I mean, I look at myself and I'm like, every morning I wake up and I tell myself, Mirembe, you have to be rich. Yeah? But when you say that youths don't want to engage in these platforms that have been availed, you know, he spoke of bureaucracy, like, first of all, to get a trade license is hard, eh? Then the money you have to pay. These systems, like one of my panelists said, the systems are there. The implementation is the problem. Yeah? Because you're going to say there is a Myoga, they are skilling people here and there, then I will want to go for the skilling. I asked somebody, please direct me to where we are going. Direct me to where they are teaching people to sew from. Direct me where they are teaching people bakery from. They point to the place, you're not seeing the place. You reach the place, and they're not sewing machines, but they are called to learn how to sew. They have called you to bake, there is no oven. I mean,
Are you saying government keeps saying these things are in place, but they're actually not there?
he spoke something very fundamental. They send money from this way up. It's like this. It reaches this way down, it is like this. Because the hands through which the money goes, all that bureaucracy
Everyone
which we
wants
talk
to
about,
get-
they're like, that's a phrase most Ugandans use. However beneficial the thing is, someone is saying, where, as a person, what do I get? Yeah, I'm trying to help them. Okay, yeah, I want to help them. But as Mirembe that is a vice that is killing us. Because we are in an era where we need leaders in politics, not politicians in leadership. But what we are getting is politicians in leadership, because they are centered on their own benefit. So I may want to attend the yoga and I go for them and I find that what they're going to teach me is something I maybe learned some time back. Like, or if I'm going to find the place and the instructors are also not there, I mean, why would I want to go there? If today I've gone, I've not gotten good motivation. The next day I've gone, I'm trying to be nice, go there again, but there is no hope. The money comes, the money is not there. The president will say, we have sent out this money. The MP on ground will say, and once you tamper with the economy, it's going to mean all of us are going to be left hanging, because there is someone who, at the expense of we who don't have voices, is being a beneficiary. And there is something about youth. We are in our 20s, let's say, and the people who are in power they are in those ages, those beautiful ages. And they are not about to get out of power, according to them, because there is a phrase, with age comes wisdom. So they believe they are actually wiser to remain in those seats. But now, if they keep on remaining in those seats, even if we get the skills or what to get the employment, we are going to, yes, it's okay to start from the bottom, but you start from the bottom and you're still at the bottom because the people at the top are feeling too wise to leave the place. Yeah, if I'm going to be working in an institution and I have entered as a receptionist, but I qualify to be like an auditor, yeah, and the chief auditor maybe is 57. A few years in the future, they are 65, but they don't want to leave the place. It's going to mean I'm going to remain as a receptionist until I'm like 35. Yeah, which is not a nice thing. So generally, the youth have been disadvantaged. We are trying our best, but sometimes the trying seems not to be enough. And we keep on saying these things out, we keep on saying them out. And the matter of fact that they are just said and nothing is done makes us more talkers than doers. And talking is not doing. Actually, I have a broad thought for my country, Uganda. For a country whose economy greatly survives on agriculture, I wonder why it is an optional subject. And as though that's not enough, agriculture or digging in school is a punishment. So even if you tell a child right now that if you learn how to farm, in the future you'll be a great farmer, you will earn money, then they know when I'm found making noise on assembly, they're going to make me to go and dig, and that is a punishment. So even if they were teaching us these skills, or what is that? There was the time when the president offered giving cows or things like that to people for benefiting of their farms. I mean, it becomes so hard to survive in a nation where everybody thinks about themselves before they think of somebody else. So like I said, we need leaders in politics, not politicians in leadership.
Thank you. Council, government programs. Do you think this is the magic bullet to create wealth for young people? PDM, Emioga, and Tandikwa Youth Livelihood Fund, to mention.
I think it's clear what we have observed with evidence concerning the legacy of the NRM government and the the whole range of programs that it has instituted over time, is that it's been a spectacular failure. It's a failure, I think, for the obvious reasons. Number one, the motivation for these programs is not the genuine desire, the sincere desire to uplift people from poverty and empower them to participate in the money economy. The desire is to supply and extend patronage to a wide and broader, group of people, so that then the government can use it as leverage to buy political security for the furtherance of political aims and objectives. This is the fundamental and core reason as to why these programs have failed, some even at the takeoff stage. Now, if you have people that do not have the genuine desire to transform economically the population, but by the day they are crafting new strategies, they are fashioning new programs, they are implementing new initiatives, the question is to what end? And you see, this also reflects in the attitude of the population in as far as embracing these programs is concerned. We all know for sure that a majority of Ugandans participate in these programs for the immediate, small economic opportunity gain. If, for example, the district cow, or whichever person is responsible for the initiation and implementation of these socio-economic, programs, calls for a meeting of the community, most people will attend out of the desire to pick something for themselves or for their families. No one comes, motivated that I am going to, have a good understanding of this program, the mechanism through which it works, with the view of maybe obtaining long-term livelihood or sustenance for me or my family. So there is, I think, a lot of apathy from the public. And why the apathy? It is because the public distrusts the government. It distrusts the leadership. It knows that the leadership institutes these programs not for the purpose of economically transforming the population, but for the benefit of furthering their political aims. Sure. So that disconnect, I think it is responsible for the failure of most of these initiatives. And the other point that perhaps I should state is that the government has got its priorities wrong. If your objective is to economically transform the population, you've got to begin with the structural challenges that plague the economy. What are those? You realize that the economy is comprised of two broad strands. There is the private sector, then there is government, the government-led sector of the economy. And that is through employment, the civil service, tendering, what have you, services, and whatnot. Then there is the private sector. The private sector, I think, accounts for the largest share of the economy. That being the case, I think it would naturally occur to any responsible government that you need to facilitate and support the private sector so that there is a broad expansion in the economy to take in as many people as possible at any one point, so that then you facilitate employment. Now, when you facilitate employment at that level, especially in sectors like, services, construction, what other sectors, maybe health and education, and you encourage and put in place the rebate measures where you can be able to, for example, avail cheap credit to potential entrepreneurs to invest in those sectors, not to say the direct foreign investment also in the same sectors. It encourages growth, rapid growth of the economy. So that way, the economy is stimulated. There is higher employment likelihood for the young people, who will also now, as a trickle-down effect, as a ripple effect, go to the grassroots and maybe start something. If a young man has made maybe money over a 5-year course period, they would want to go and construct a house in their community. That could provide employment to other people there at the grassroots level. So I think the government is focused on the wrong areas and priorities as far as, addressing this issue is concerned.
Thank you so much, Council, and thank you so much, gentlemen and lady. We are still on the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV. We are heading into a short break and we shall be right back.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
We'll be back from that short break. It is the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV. I am Phillip Muliisa. we are still discussing employment challenges in Uganda in light of the Court of Appeal ruling to actually allow employers to fire the employees without reason. Now, discussing that still is a panel of distinguished young people of this country. On my immediate left is Mr. Nuwandinda Wilson. I have Miss Angela Mirembe and Counsel Kwagala Isaac. Gentlemen and lady, we've discussed a couple of these challenges, and I want us to try and talk about solutions, because the challenges are so much. We discussed, yes, people do not have employment, people are paid less, 200,000, people are paid, so sometimes people are not even paid the little they are supposed to get. People in the informal sector, they're not protected by government, and actually everyone is paying taxes. So we have a system where a certain section of the public is doing their part. They are paying taxes, they are trying to innovate, they are trying to skill themselves, going to school, parents are paying school fees, and government seems not to be playing their part in trying to make sure these people who are giving them taxes get a better way of living. And a case in point, we have a region in this country called Karamoja. This is a region that is so rich in minerals. It has gold, it has cobalt, it has rare earth minerals, it has uranium recently, and so on. But the young people of Karamoja do not have education. The young people of Karamoja are actually facing hunger. The young people of Karamoja are facing the extremes of cattle wrestling. They are being killed. Their land is being taken away. How do we get out of this situation as a people, especially the young people? I want us to focus so much on the young people, because if about 70 or over 75% of this Uganda is young people, and you have to know that of that 75%, more than 80% of it is actually people below the age of 15. So how do we secure a better, and this government says they're securing the future of you and me, the young people of this nation. How do we make sure these people are catered for in a progressive Uganda? Council, I want to start with you.
I think for me, the first step would be to self-introspect as a people, first and foremost, because the government, in as much as it is the political and legal entity that is in charge of instituting and implementing policies which are aimed at alleviating the economic plight of the population. Now, in this case, the young people, it is imperative that as a people, we are also sober enough and we have the consciousness, both the social and political consciousness, to examine the circumstances of the day vis-a-vis, the people available who are affronting themselves to help in the execution of those programs. Now, why do I say so? I feel like the Ugandan public, largely, the attitude it has demonstrated recently with respect to the question of governance and leadership is very apathetic and cynical. There is an exhibition of, demonstrable indifference when it comes to issues of governance in this country from the Ugandan population. And that is very disheartening. It is disheartening for a responsible and also, I think, bona fide citizen like myself. Maybe for some people, there could be some doubt as to whether they are actually citizens or not. But I think the first responsibility should be borne by the population. The population should be able to examine itself and also examine the potential leaders that are emerging, because they are the ones that are going to have to conceive those programs or initiatives and then ultimately implement them for the benefit of the people. Now, that said, the other issue is to do with the leadership. You realize, and it is my judgment, that the leadership of this country as currently constituted today does not have, I think, the capacity to, institute a fundamental change in the, and I don't say that ironically, because I understand that was the core promise of their leadership at the time they came into power.
86.
But it does not have the capacity to institute a fundamental change with respect to the political, social, or economic standing of the Ugandan people. If a leadership is, premised on corruption, if a leadership is premised on irresponsibility, if a leadership is premised on perennial and consistent contravention of all principles of good governance and the rule of law and constitutionalism, I do not think that's the kind of leadership which you can have high expectation that it is going to be able to deliver on issues like economic transformation of the people, especially
But
the
you
young
see,
people.
Council Kwagala, on that particular point, there's a concept in political science where they say the leadership of a particular society is actually a true representation of its peoples. So perhaps that's the people of Uganda.
That's where I began from. And if you recall, I said, first and foremost, it is the responsibility of the Ugandan people to reflect and introspect. Why they have to do that, it is for the reason that they have got to examine their history vis-a-vis, the present, and then deliberate on the way forward. And without that process being undertaken, it will be very difficult to, have a competent replacement for this lethargic leadership that we have today. And I think partly that explains the reason as to why we've even been able to tolerate such a leadership for a long time, because it's coming to almost 40 years of the same leadership. And we all agree, there is broad consensus among Ugandans that this is a failed leadership. But then you ask the question, how come that no one is willing to participate in a concerted effort to dislodge this leadership, even constitutionally? All the avenues that are, available to us in our constitution. You realize that for most Ugandans, they are, very cynical about undertaking such measures. So I believe for me, Uganda's problem fundamentally is a problem of leadership. So not until we are able to galvanize, first and foremost, purposeful unity as a people, which has to be hinged on, I think, a very acute political and social consciousness to be able to navigate the challenge and question of leadership, we are not going to make any significant headway going forward.
Thank you so much. Council cites a couple of things, including bad leadership and, trying to create breaks for that kind of leadership and what we can do constitutionally as citizens to put a stop to it. But I want to engage you, Mr. Nuwandinda. Recently, we've had efforts by the Justice and Constitutional Affairs Minister, the Honorable Norbert Mao, in trying to push what he calls the national reconciliation. It is a song we've heard over time. Back in 2018, we had something called the National Dialogue that did not see its first fruits. Do you think it is time Ugandans sit down and discuss some of the key issues Council has just cited? We sit and say, okay, this is the future we want as Uganda. Young people should be treated this way. Employees should be treated this way. The adults should be treated this way. Is it time?
Yeah, definitely it is time. But then the question goes back to, is the country ready? Are we ready for that time and to implement that? About the national reconciliation, I don't think Norbert Mao is in position to do that on the dialogue. In the first place, when he assumed that position, he was sticking to the fact that he's going for dialogue. Dialogue, what he called the peaceful transition. and I'm one of the person who first believed in him because I've believed in Robert Mao for many years. But then that was shut down when actually the president came back a little time ago and said, me, dialogue with Mao? No, I've never said that publicly.
But you see, what the Honorable Mao keeps saying, they still actually see green light there.
So now who is fooling who? Because he said,
you see, the challenge is that over time, like Council stated, cynicism, we expect the worst all the time. Why not give him a chance and see if he can actually deliver on that cause?
No, but I think, sorry to interject, but in this respect, I would support him because if you're saying I have entered into a relationship with you, we are partners, we are equal partners, and the purpose, the aim of this relationship is to achieve this objective or aim. And yet the other party publicly denies me and also denies the existence
I am
of,
not into
of
that.
that relationship. Then what judgment, as an observer, really, an independent observer, can I form of that? So I think he's really correct in that observation.
So me, when I had the president say that, actually, that is when I lost all the trust in Mao, and I was sure he just entered the government to be a minister and also share on the national cake. But there's nothing like dialogue. If the president publicly shut that down, then who am I to say that they are in a dialogue? Technically, there is no dialogue that is going on.
But you see, again, still on that point, dialogue is bigger than the two people, or what we can call national reconciliation. It is bigger than the Honorable Mao. It is bigger than President Museveni. It is something that has to be undertaken by the peoples of Uganda. If you remember the efforts of 2018, it was an initiative by civil society, an initiative by the religious institutions, an initiative by the academic institutions, every citizen of Uganda. And I think the point at which we did not agree as a country is who should fund this initiative. Some of the voices were saying, let it be funded by citizens themselves directly, by me and you contributing money to this process. Or let us have government find a budget for this process. And I think that's where the disagreement was. So even when Chairman Mao and President Museveni failed to agree on that particular thing, we can still push it as a people. Not so.
Yeah, true. We can push it, but then we cannot let them aside because as we are pushing for the dialogue, we have protagonists in the play. You cannot, if the president has denounced that, then it literally loses meaning. So, of course, we continue national reconciliation. We continue to push it and dialogue, what. But then, if the president actually, so that takes me back to ask myself a question: what was in that document that they signed between Mao and the president?
The cooperation agreement.
The cooperation agreement.
I think as far as I know, it is a document that is privy to them, the two of them actually.
So it was private, but then on that little light that was shed by the president and what, then we can clearly say that there was nothing like dialogue inside. Or if it was there, it was also a trick to pull Mao inside and embarrass him and just leave him there.
Do you then say, on the basis of values, Chairman Mao should have resigned from that position
automatically? Yes, because Mao, in the trust we have, of course, we have seen over there is that actually maybe a peaceful election would not lead into a peaceful transition of power. Or, of course, we cannot go back to the bush and fight like they did. Then my thought that actually that was the right way to go for Mao. Join dialogue and we also express a peaceful transition. And when they signed that agreement, that was the first step that was taken. But then the embarrassment came when the president said that no, I don't have anything to do with the Mao about the dialogue. You know, so that is when I lost all the hope in that. And for Mao to keep his integrity, he would have resigned. And say the person that I want to engage with to dialogue and lead into a peaceful transition has rejected. So I pulled back into opposition and activism and I try other ways. Because that technically and broadly it had failed there and then.
Thank you. Gentlemen, you know, this is a subject that is so critical to the progress of this country. Chairman Mao keeps saying that Uganda currently is like a pressure cooker. And he says if we do not let some pressure out, it is definitely going to explode. And he says he is actually that vent that is putting out a bit of pressure. What is your, before I come to you, what is your, you know, reception of such a message?
I think my opinion on his views is that I entirely agree with his judgment, given the present circumstances that prevail in the country. My personal judgment of the situation is that I think Uganda suffers from accumulated unhealed trauma. That's my diagnosis of the situation. Right from independence up to date, the people of Uganda have not had the opportunity to come together collectively and then consider and deliberate in an environment that is sincere and open, which can then, I think, reach a consensus that is agreeable to all of us. And the failure of that is, I think, what precipitates Mao's judgment and my judgment of the situation now. Where I fundamentally disagree with the Honorable Mao is the prescription that he's, recommending to the problem. If your state, he claims that the core reason as to why he joined the NRM government was to institute national reconciliation through a dialoguing process. The question then is, practically, what faith has he demonstrated to ensure that that is realized for the time he's been in government? This is I think some 2 years or so. But also, if you have a president that is publicly denouncing any such consideration, then what do you make of that? It casts Mao, first and foremost, as an insincere actor in that process, one who says something but who doesn't mean it. But also, the president, from his conduct and attitude, has consistently demonstrated that he is not ready and willing to dialogue with his opponents, let alone the Ugandan people themselves. Because so many initiatives, like you correctly pointed out from the past, have been floated. So many people have, I think, applied themselves to efforts to ensure that we have a comprehensive national dialogue encompassing all the, the whole range of diverse political actors and institutions, members of the civil society, the academia, and the ordinary citizens. It's been the president that has been consistently and strongly rebuffing that idea. I think to him, his sense of power and understanding of power is that you've got to dominate all these other critical sectors that comprise the Ugandan state. Now, this is a person that the Honorable Mao has joined. So I think, to me, by Honorable Mao joining the president in the execution of, his leadership aims and ambitions, it's just evidence enough that he has taken his side, and we should be able to see him for who and exactly he is. So I think the pretense that Ugandans have begun to fashion that under the NRM regime there could be a likelihood of dialogue, that is false. Our consideration should be at exploring other ways altogether. But if you are to ask us to whether it is necessary, absolutely, it is necessary, because we need to heal this trauma that has afflicted Uganda for the last 60 or so years. If we do not heal it, then it is only going to beget more trauma. When the NRM government came in power, I think in 1986, it instituted the order Commission,
Justice Odell
which
Commission.
inquired into the atrocities that had been committed by the past regimes and whatnot. Presently, today, the NRM has committed much more atrocities than all the other previous regimes have committed combined. So, who is going to inquire into those atrocities? Are we going to await for a new government, or rather, we should now have the courage and sincerity to examine both our past and present and arrive at a new consensus which will take Uganda forward?
Thank you. Miss Mirembe, he calls it pretense, he calls it lack of values, the initiative by Chairman Mao. And you see, Council does us justice to mention about the Justice Odell Commission and the series of recommendations it had. But also, even before the recommendations, when you look at our past, from independence, even pre-independence, you have a conflict between Buganda and Uganda, where Buganda wanted to get independence itself and aside of the larger Uganda. Then you have the disagreements between DP and UPC. Then 1966, Kabaka and UPC. The president attacks the kingdom. Kabaka goes into exile. Fast forward 71, President Amin and the prolonged war to get him out of power by UNLA and FRONASA and the Tanzanians. 79, come to the election 1980, we claim it was rigged according to the people in government. They go into the bush, another war to 86. Come to the NRM government, he says it has committed more atrocities than any other previous regime. How do we heal from this? Is it time for reconciliation and dialogue?
Well, everybody needs to heal. It takes time off and heal. But this dialogue we are talking of, we should first know actually which people are dialoguing, because if it's NRM dialoguing with NRM, it is it's putting butter in oil. Like the one is going to melt in the other, and not much will be seen. If we talk about atrocities of the people of then, it is true that didn't really have a clean record. But in present day, the audacity to stand up and speak against the president of Uganda is done by people who have a living, they trust that the living God is going to save them the night they're going to wake up and be alive, because we are in an era of induced terrorism by the leaders of the country. Because, sorry to use a very bombastic term, terrorism, ouch. But anyhow, if people's freedom of speech is infringing on their freedom of existence, like freely in the country as a citizen, it means we really need to get a way of getting out of loggerheads. Yet the other party is leading. NRM is the leading government of Uganda. But if the leading government of Uganda is making us feel unsafe in a place we call home, surely where are we going to run to? Because
I want you to help me in this aspect. The NRM says they are open with dialogue, but they are not open with reconciliation. And what's the difference? They say dialogue means let us talk as Ugandans and yes, agree on a few things. But it takes away the aspect of saying the NRM government has actually done some wrongs to the citizens and therefore it needs to reconcile with them. How do we bring NRM to the table of reconciliation other than stopping on dialogue?
But, okay, how do you bring NRM to table? An interesting question, because are they dialoguing to start with? Because if they have started with dialogue, we can pull them in slowly to compensation. But if the dialogue itself is non-existent, it means we are going to have to start from the dialogue bit, reach out to them, talk to them nicely. Then we start reaching a place of consensus, mutual understanding, which is going to happen if the government is willing to actually accept that it is leading these people. It gave the government gave us rights. I believe we all have rights as citizens. So if we are not in position to speak, it is already a hard thing. If we cannot dialogue with them, if we cannot say that this is the injustice that is happening, please don't do it. Please think about us. And they are still going to hear our cries, and they will be as though they have landed on deaf ears. It means that the bit of compensation or understanding or forgiveness is not really going to happen. I don't know how we are going to bring in the government, how we are going to tell them what they have done is not particularly right. But interestingly, they know it is not right. But because it is politics, they'll keep on saying it is a dirty game. Yeah, it's for the poor and survival, things like that. It is going to be hard for us to call people who have understood the art of manipulating the human mind and making us believe that everything they do is for our own good, that we cannot actually challenge what they have done against us. So generally, how to get the government to sit down with us and we understand each other is going to be hard, because from our perspective, we are not being beneficiaries. But them being the beneficiaries are going to find it hard to take in our pleas, because as we plea and they try to get solutions, we start being the beneficiaries and they start being the benefactor.
Thank you so much, Council Kwagala. By any chance, we have the national dialogue and subsequently reconciliation. I want to draw you to two examples. In South Africa, post-apartheid, we had the National Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and key to this is truth. And the people of South Africa agreed that let us sit, have a discussion, and everyone comes out and says whatever they have done. Whoever has something that hurt them comes out, says it out, we heal and forgive each other. However, in the Gambia, there was a similar commission, but for it, in the end of giving out the evidence and you saying what you did and what hurt you in the years of President Yahya Jammeh, the commission was mandated with the responsibility of recommended people who can be taken into punitive measures. You did this, we understand, you've come and said I did A, B, C, D, but the people you tortured deserve some sort of justice. Please, let us not just heal, go to court and face the consequences of your crimes. If we had dialogue in this country and reconciliation, do you think we should stop it at healing, telling the truth, and start joking about these realities, or it should have a punitive element?
Let me categorically state right away from the outset that as a baseline position, I do not think you can have meaningful reconciliation or peace without the resultant element of justice. In order to achieve the former, you've got to first facilitate. No. In order to achieve the latter, you've got to first facilitate and realize the former. So, in other words, justice is a product. Justice is the precursor to peace and effective reconciliation. It is the foundation to that. So, for me, I insist on the need to have justice. By justice, dispense justice to the people that were injured on account of the atrocities committed by the perpetrators, but also bring the perpetrators to justice. The case in point I will cite is the post-Second World War. History witnesses to the, I think, the initiative of the victor powers, the Allied powers, their efforts in Germany to bring the Nazi, former members of the Nazi political party, who are largely the perpetrators of most of the atrocities that happened in Germany. And there is no way you are going to have a reconciled and peaceful, politically, organized German, new reconstructed society without first bringing those perpetrators to justice, regardless of whatever effort you are going to apply to that situation. why is that necessary? It is necessary for the reason that it is important for people to feel that, you know, their trauma has been healed, that there is someone who has listened to their innermost sentiment about an issue as serious as that one, and then something has been done about it. So I do not, you know, prescribe the solution that justice should be motivated by, you know, political considerations to facilitate things like political witch hunt or even vengeance. No, far from it. But there should be an environment where people frankly and openly can, you know, talk to each other. Then they arrive at certain conclusions of that dialogue. But in so doing, collectively, we should be able to point to certain causes which have led to the afflictions that we have in the society, and the people that have perpetrated those afflictions should be, you know, met with justice.
Thank you so much, and I want to engage you in that specific. You gave the example of the Nuremberg trials post-World War II, and one of the things we get out of that trial is the doctrine of individual culpability. Remember, most of the people that had committed crimes actually said, you know, I was on orders. I was on orders of someone at the top. I was on orders of the President Hitler to go and kill the Jews, to go and kill the British and the French. Do you think, in the event that reconciliation will have the people, should we prosecute them as individuals or as a group? We say this organization of NRM did ABC, or this institution of the army. Should we prosecute the institution or the individual? But two, when we say we have to include this punitive element, then how do you convince, in this case, a government like NRM, who knows that given punitive element, some of our members are going to be subject to that trial? How do you convince them to be part of the reconciliation? Aren't you pushing them out?
I think what is clear, the attitude the NRM has demonstrated with respect to the prospect for dialogue is that it is not ready. The NRM has not expressed any willingness to be a participant in that process. That should be clear. Even when they have pretended, ultimately, the same attitude has always been exhibited clearly. I think it is only the Ugandans who are not perhaps intelligent enough to, you know, view the NRM for what truly it is. Now, regarding the punitive aspect of this process, and as to whether it will not discourage the NRM or even the realization of the comprehensive reconciliation and dialogue process, I think it goes back again to what your orientation of justice is. Because I think these were also legitimate fears for the victor powers in post-war Germany or Japan, for example, or Italy. Because I think the conflict was, if these are members of a society, these are people that have been attached, I think, significantly and strongly to this society. They have relations, they have business, you know, connections. Some of them have been in influential positions of leadership. What are we going to be able to do? Is it a question of collective responsibility that, you know, we're acting as an entity, as a party, as the NRM, or it's a question for individual responsibility? I think there should be a balance, because in as much as God created us as, you know, separate entities, sometimes we are overborne by circumstances. An influential and higher power can overbear me to force me, to compel me to act in a certain way. And on account of that action, I am liable. But by extension, he could be liable as well. That's the element of now vicarious liability. But also, you realize that as human beings, we have what we call agents. The agents is the power to, you know, autonomously act
And
and make decisions for ourselves. And that emanates from our conscience. We have conscience as people, separate entities from each other. So I think it is not sufficient for anyone to claim, especially a person that is seized with reasonable intelligence and agents, and who has a conscience, to say that, you know, I was overborne by the orders of a certain group or an individual. Then the question is, if you applied your intelligence and agents to that specific set of circumstances, what judgment did you make out of it? This was the foremost reason as to why the decision was made to ultimately try the Nazis in Germany. Because at the end of the day, existing separately as a reasonable and intelligent individual, what does your judgment tell you? Is it right to torture someone? Is it right to murder someone? Is it right to sanction those actions or to supervise over the execution of those actions as an intelligent person seized with their, you know, self-autonomy, integrity, and agency? The answer is no. So may I believe that ultimately, in order for our society to heal and in order to reconstruct a new strong foundation for the Ugandan state, there has got to be a comprehensive dialogue and reconciliation process. But to underpin that is the need for effective justice. Justice both for the victims of the atrocities, but also to bring to justice the perpetrators of the same atrocities.
Thank you so much, Council. That's quite comprehensive and so clear. I want to engage you, Mr. Nuwandinda. He mentions that we need to be, go to the actual indices of justice, charge these people, prosecute them, and have them sentenced in any case if they have to. But you see, in Nazi Germany, the effect was that even today, mentioning that you could belong to Nazi is criminal. How does the future look like for the NRM? In any case, we have the dialogue and the NRM. He says the NRM has committed a lot of atrocities. The NRM says the UPC did more. UPC says Amin did more, and so on. How does the future look like in that aspect?
You see, I asked that, what does the future of NRM look like? If there comes a time NRM leaves power, after some time, we shall also be here discussing what to do for NRM, just like we are discussing the reconciliation of what. Because, you see, we cannot heal from the things that are still happening. If there is to be reconciliation, even at the local time, if I'm reconciling with you about...
You see, I want to cut you short a little. You say we cannot heal from things that are still happening.
Yeah.
What are those things?
The atrocities that the previous regimes of Amin and UPC did. You see, the killing of people. If I can just mention a few. How many people have died in the NRM government?
I don't know.
Probably. How many people are in prison just because they support a different political party?
I still don't know.
So, to create, we cannot do dialogue and reconciliation when there is no conducive environment for it to play and focus on. So how would you engage someone that has their dad, their mom, their sister in prison just because they participated in an election and they were in opposition, and you're calling those people to reconcile with them and dialogue? We probably cannot heal from the things that are still happening. If the NRM really wants reconciliation and dialogue, and this, I take this back at this to Honorable Mao, he's the Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs. At least I expected the bare minimum. If dialogue has failed, let him work on currently, the opposition MPs are not attending parliament because of human rights violations and the people that are in prison, and their names are there. So at least I would expect Mao at least work on that, the bare minimum. Let these people come out of prison. So yeah, why are they there? We have been pushed out of AGOA. Because of this, we are destroying our foreign policy. And then we are the same people coming back to reconcile. Reconcile from what? The previous regimes, you saw the letter of Museveni stopping the construction of what the Idi Amin and stopping the institute and Idi Amin lecture. There is some, the last statement he mentioned in that letter, not to use the exact words, but he was like, the only thing Ugandans will do for Amin family is not to kill the children and the family that was left. So in short, for him, he thinks that according to the atrocities that Amin did, Ugandans should have killed the whole lineage. That's what he clearly mentioned. But then he's still doing the same things. The same things. Actually, if we are to put Amin here and Museveni,
you know that debate has been on for the past couple of months.
For 9 years and 40 years.
For your existence.
For 9 years and 40 years. You see, there are some issues that Amin really that are still here. Look at that Ugandan house that you go to the Europe and pose there. That was Amin. Go to.
You see, we've had a debate in the country since that letter of the president, and people are saying, one, why should the president actually be so judgmental to that extent? Because that's the mandate of the judicial system, to pass judgment and so on. But two, they're saying we are creating a judgment of 9 years, actually 8 years, vis-a-vis 40 years.
40 years.
It is unfair. And three, they cite a couple of things that are quite tangible that the Amin administration left in this country, and you mentioned the Uganda house. Let's mention embassies, because it's more than one in the UK. Let's mention Uganda Airlines, the establishment of Uganda Airlines. Let's talk about the railway. Let's talk about the fuel reservoirs. Let's talk about transport on Lake Victoria. Let's talk about
the Mpoma satellite.
Yes, Mpoma satellite. Talk about even the, one of the things stations pride in is being strong militarily and so on. In the 8 years of Idi Amin, you must say Uganda was one of the countries that were looked at in areas of security.
So that's where I disagree with Museveni, and I say that that letter was emotional. It was emotional. Because
does this tell you that Museveni has some personal hatred to Idi Amin?
Yeah, of course there is hatred, but then what I see also is that Museveni he wants, it is either him or no one else.
Oh.
You get, so why are you remembering Amin when I'm here? What is that? So, but then, I don't want to go in the comparisons of the 80 years and the 40 years, but the things that Amin did, of course he also had a lot of the negative side that he did, that we can also talk about. But then, we can all agree that you cannot erase Amin in Uganda's history. You cannot.
Oh, he is a president of this country.
And I will keep on saying this, that Idi Amin is the largest export Uganda has ever had.
Thank you so much on that point. And
maybe let me just suggest a small comment.
Please.
I think it is imperative that we do not make the mistake to whitewash the atrocities of Idi Amin.
Yeah, true.
What is clear is that Idi Amin's legacy as a president of this country is not something to celebrate. We should make that absolutely clear as a baseline position. But also, in comparison with Mr. Museveni's legacy, I think we now have a difficult situation in a sense that people now feel nostalgic about Idi Amin's period, even us that were not present to witness that period. We are somewhat persuaded to perhaps, imagine and perhaps say that maybe he was a better leader
You know,
than Museveni.
there's a concept in political science that says nostalgia does not mean that things were better in the past, but it's just because things have gone wrong in the present. Thank you.
So I think for me, the whole point, to just conclude this, I find it extremely hypocritical of Mr. Museveni to denounce Amin, yet in the present, for those of us that have had the benefit to witness his rule, he has done the same things and even much worse than we read about Amin, a past leader. So Mr. Museveni has squandered the opportunity to now, you know, with evidence, demonstrate to Ugandans that he's a better president than Idi Amin. And I think this is going to be the hallmark of his legacy. And I think it also explains quite the emotional outburst and motivation as to why he rejects the comparisons with the Idi Amin era, because he knows for all intents and purposes there is no difference. Maybe he's only a better fascist or dictator than Amin was.
And not to add, we should not agree that at least however much he committed that bad side that we cannot erase and whitewash, like you said. What I liked, if you read the history and all that he did, Amin was pro-Uganda. Uganda first. It is Uganda first, which is then the opposite in this NRM government. Because Mr. Museveni quoted that 1972, the economic, when he sent away the Indians.
Mm-hmm.
But then we don't dig inside to see what actually Amin wanted. He never wanted Indians out of the country. He gave them option. Nationalize. Because what they were doing...
citizens of Uganda.
Become citizens of Uganda. They were doing their business here, but taking developments in their country. So all that Amin wanted is that nationalize, you become citizens of the country, but then they don't say that. They just say, pushed away Indians, did what.
Thank you so much. And when you bring the example of Indians and so on, key to notice that there's an argument I've heard over time that much as Amin sent out the Asians and property was left in Uganda, he actually did not take, ownership of this property. He distributed it to different Ugandans. But that's something we should discuss another time. I want to engage you on... Let's come back
so
to
that
education.
was a mark of patriotism.
That's what I said.
You cannot tell me that Amin was a bad man.
Earlier in the conversation, you did talk about agriculture and how it is an optional subject in our schools, and having other subjects like,
English,
literature in English and so on as, the standard. But I want to engage you. Recently, we have, I think for the last 5 years now, there's a new curriculum being run in our secondary schools. And we are reducing, theoretical class time and creating a bit of practical time in these schools. Do you think that is going to impact the young people in terms of skilling, but also raising our chances of getting employment in the future? In a minute.
I believe strongly that the system that has been put in place, if well managed, shall be the future of Uganda in a few. Because if students are being taught knitting from school or being taught to sew, bakery, this is all self-employment. It may not particularly be in the formal sector, but it is a source of livelihood. If you are, like where I studied from Our Lady of Good Counsel, Gayaza, and in my Form 1, it was compulsory that a Form 1 student came with an art piece and they would sew the piece out. So it would either have fruits, vegetables, animals, or things like that. Up to date, I have my art piece. It's very pretty, and I have made like extra 3 or 4 and sold them. I believe that is a good thing for me. If the skill is being taught you from the best, it doesn't leave you. They say it is hard to teach an old dog new tricks of hunting. So if you are taught from the bottom how to do these things, surely you'll be in position to self-sustain. And about agriculture, broadly, I think, again, for a country whose backbone is agriculture, for a country that is known as the Pearl of Africa, how do we have parts of this country suffering from floods and parts of this country suffering from famine? We are not allowed to divert water from the Nile because it supplies, I think, in Egypt or something. But that was a desertified land. If we could borrow some of that knowledge and use it in farming in Uganda and actually apply biological principles of farming, it would benefit us in a way that would have organic food. You see, we are talking of hunger, poverty among the youth, but neocolonialism is real. Why do I have to buy an orange and today and have to go back and buy an orange again tomorrow because I don't have seeds to plant? Because that's going to take me back to a system of letting my money go somewhere else for me to get what I want. Yet if we actually have organic seeds to plant, the soils are fertile enough to let those things grow. And
Please, as you give your final remarks.
we are living in an era where I don't know if we still have organic food. I don't know if we still have organic food, because if I was talking to an economic analyst and he said, if you want to be rich 5 years from now, buy land and do organic farming, because the rate at which Africans are fertile and giving birth is very high. So we are a mounting population and the pressure on the food sector is increasing. So if this country would invest in agriculture like wholeheartedly, it would provide employment for the youth. Because if they're going to put youths on farm to help, if the country would somehow get a centralized system of farming, I don't know, it would provide food for the country so much that we don't have.
Which is the practice elsewhere.
Yeah, it would provide food for the whole country and we would have surplus to sell off. It would also bring income on top of the other things that bring income.
Thank you so much. I want, we have, time is fast spent. We have to, yes, Mr. Nuwandinda, your final remarks.
Thank you. I want to thank my fellow panelists for an insightful discussion. And conclusively, just like our topic was, let's empower the youth to focus more on vocational skills, because the other side of formal employment seems to be scarce. It is not. And also the government should invest more in vocational skills. Let every person at least has gain a private skill that they can use just to escape poverty the other side and gain a living.
Thank you so much. And finally, Council Kwagala, let me pick your view on the new curriculum in about 30 seconds as you give your final remarks.
I think the curriculum is as a product of the findings and conclusions of the committee, the Amanya Mushega, I think, led committee, which reviewed the education policies and the curriculum in our country. And what I understand is the curriculum is now competence-based, and I think that's a good thing. It's a good metric to reach an assessment of a student's competencies and abilities, as opposed to the old model. So I think government should put in place more facilities to, facilitate the realization of the aim of the new teaching model. But what I want to say conclusively about today's topic is that it's absolutely important that the Ugandan youth do not lose confident optimism in the affairs of their country. Whenever the oppressor senses a feeling, an attitude of apathy and cynicism, the harder the oppressors. So it's absolutely imperative that we stay energized, that we stay optimistic and confident by doing what we are supposed to do, by doing our patriotic duty as the youth of this country. Once again, allow me to register my thanks to you and the Civic Space TV for making available the facilities for us to have this conversation, and many thanks to my fellow co-panelists.
Thank you so much, Council Kwagala. Isaac, for being with us today. Thank you so much, Miss Mirembe Angela, for being with us today. And thank you so much, Mr. Nuwandinda Wilson, for being with us today. And thank you so much to you, our viewer, for being with us all this time. It is the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV. Remember, this is made possible by the Center for Constitutional Governance, and we do appreciate the very good work done by the team out there. I want to leave this platform by saying we send our sympathies, our condolences to the people at war anywhere in the world. We have war in Sudan, we have war in the DRC, we have war in Somalia, we have war in the Chad, we have war in Israel and Gaza, we have war in Ukraine, we have war almost in every continent on this earth. We send our sympathies and we say, let whoever is in charge do whatever is needed to make sure war ends in the world. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.